David, good morning.
Good morning.
So we have Treasury Secretary Geithner this morning on Capitol Hill before the House Financial Services Committee. He's expected to talk a lot about how Europe might flow back to the problems there might flow back to the U.S. as well as the fiscal cliff. But I would expect that he's going to get a pretty tough time over the LIBOR scandal and what he did or didn't do back when he was president of the New York Fed.
Well, you never know what members of Congress are going to ask at a hearing. When Ben Bernanke testified the other day, it looked like they were all cutting YouTube videos showing how smart they were and never got around to asking questions. I mean, it's important to remember why the secretary is there. After the financial crisis, something called the Financial Stability Oversight Council was set up. And it was told, we want you to tell us about what the risks are to financial stability. So Mr. Geithner is there today to tell him just that. And what he's going to say is, you should worry about Europe. You should worry about the rest of the world, China, India, Brazil, they're all slowing down too. And you should worry about the effects on financial stability of this chaos in Washington over fiscal policy. Nobody knows. Are taxes going to go up at the end of the year? Is spending going to be cut or not? And he's going to say that this uncertainty and this inability to deal with what he calls an unsustainable fiscal policy is a threat to the U.S. economy.
Well, let's see if we can get some of his own words up on screen here from the testimonies you're saying. This is from Treasury Geithner's expected testimony this morning, saying the slowdown in growth in the U.S. could be exacerbated by concerns about approaching tax increases and spending cuts. Of course, David, as you say, it's going to be sort of a little bit of a balancing act here because on the one hand, it's the emerging risks to the financial system as the Financial Stability Oversight Council is meant to be monitoring. But there's also a question of, okay, you have this new regulatory structure in place, but is this council of regulators composed of people who possibly, as the LIBOR scandal shows, weren't really addressing that problem, which, has really come to dominate the discussions now?
Right. If the conversation turns to LIBOR, Geithner will say that we saw a problem and we sent all these emails to the British Central Bank and we did everything we could and blah, blah, blah. Clearly, this was not one of the top 10 concerns of Tim Geithner when he was president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. If the members of Congress are reading the papers carefully this morning, they'll hone in on what's really, I think, one of the key issues, or two key issues. One is, okay, the Fed saw this, the Fed supervises banks. Did all these people who knew that the LIBOR was being cooked tell the bank supervisors who work for them, you should go in and talk to your banks and make sure this isn't going on? Or did they not pass the message? And the second thing is, we now know that it wasn't just a conspiracy to reduce LIBOR to make your banks look stronger. We knew that at least in the case of Barclays, there is pretty strong evidence that they were manipulating LIBOR in order to improve their own trading profits.
Right, and of course it's worth noting that LIBOR, as we're talking about, is the London Interbank Offered Rate, and it's a rate set by banks around the world, and it influences a variety of interest rates, everything from some home loans to consumer loans to corporate loans, which is why there's so much focus on, as you say, the possibility that there might have been a conspiracy to rig this. Now, of course, as you said before, though, it's tough to say how much we'll be looking at the past and what happened with LIBOR, and then of course there is the future, and this comes against the backdrop now of, as we were reporting yesterday, as our colleague John Hilsenrath was reporting, that the Fed is considering more extraordinary action for the economy. We see continued signs of weakening. Where do you at this point see the odds of the Fed needing to act or acting in August as opposed to, say, September?
Well, here's the deal. So there is new worry about the economy. You can see it in the tone of Mr. Geithner's remarks. You could see it in what Ben Bernanke said in his recent testimony. In our Wall Street Journal NBC News poll, 27% of the people say they expect the economy to get better in the next 12 months. In March, it was 40%. So there's consumer pessimism. All signs are, as John Hilsenrath reported this morning, that the Fed is preparing to do something unless the economy shows some new signs, unexpected signs, welcome signs of life in the next few months. Whether it comes at the meeting at the end of July or the middle of September, I have no idea. I think there's a lot of speculation about that. There's arguments on both sides. If you think that things are getting worse, acting sooner is better than acting later. If you think that you want more data to make sure this isn't just some momentary weak patch, then you wait until September so you don't overdo it. And I think that's the Fed conversation appears to have turned less to whether to put more money into the system and more to when is best to do it and how best to do it.
And of course, we have seen a weakening of a lot of economic data recently. I think if you see here, you look at something like the ISM non-manufacturing index, that's starting to show weakness. We've seen in the manufacturing index weakness. Is there a sense, though, do you think, that perhaps the weakness we're seeing in such data is transitory, a word the Fed likes to use, or is it something that's really more structural that they'll have to address quickly?
Well, I think that's really I don't think it's structural, and there's nothing the Fed is going to do that's going to make anything better immediately. But I think the big question is this a soft patch and by the end of the year things will be looking better, or is this the beginning of something more serious? And you can see in the incoming corporate earnings different opinions about that. Yesterday we saw United Parcel Service. They seem really worried. Package shipping demand is down, and they're talking about a 1% second half of the year. That's very slow. This morning we saw Caterpillar. They were out their economic forecast. They have the most detailed economic forecast of any company that issues one. They're cautious, but they're more optimistic than UPS. So there you have two companies looking at the same circumstances, looking in different industries, of course, and coming to different conclusions. That's why it's hard to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve. You have to make these decisions without being sure about what exactly is happening, and looking in the rearview mirror and seeing what the indicators were for June is not always a very good guide.
Right, well, indeed, and that is why it's going to be so interesting to see how they come down at the end of this month, and then maybe if they would decide to wait till September. David Wessel, thank you very much.